The plane's engines roared like thunder, and I stood there frozen, watching it lift into the pale Florida sky. My suitcase was still in my hand, the handle digging into my palm. I waited, stupidly, for someone to come running back, arms waving, eyes wide, saying there'd been a mistake. No one came. And as the plane shrank into a silver dot, something inside me broke so quietly I barely noticed at first. They'd left me. It wasn't a last-minute mix-up or a chaotic family error. I wasn't late. I wasn't lost. I was supposed to be on that flight, except I wasn't, because they hadn't bought me a ticket, they knew. Before I tell you the rest, pause. If you're still here, if this caught you even a little, hit subscribe. My story's just getting started, and you're going to want to see how far I went from being left behind to finally taking control. Okay. It had started like any other vacation. Our parents had been planning it for months. A week in California, a resort near the ocean, some kind of reset trip they said we all needed. I wasn't sure why. Reset from what? Life had been the same gray blur for a while. Mom and Dad worked constantly. Amber, my younger sister, lived in her own world of selfies and friends. I was there, present, but invisible. At the airport, things were tense. Dad was barking at someone on the phone. Mom was juggling documents. Amber was glued to her screen. I stood beside them, my backpack slung over one shoulder, the wheels of my suitcase squeaking slightly with every step. I remember checking the boarding pass kiosk. I hadn't been able to find mine in the pile Mom handed me the night before. She waved it off. "We'll sort it at the airport," she'd said. So I waited. But at check-in, when they scanned their tickets, I was the odd one out. "No reservation under that name," the clerk said, frowning at her screen. "What?" I blinked, thinking maybe I'd misheard. "I'm sorry," she repeated. "You're not booked on this flight." My mom's smile was tight. "It must be a mistake. We'll check again." They moved aside with the attendant. I stood alone, trying not to panic as the minutes ticked past. When they came back, Dad's jaw was set. "Look, you're going to have to stay with Aunt May. We'll call her." "That's 3 states away," I said, stunned. "She'll understand." They were rushing now. The final call for boarding was echoing over the speakers. Amber barely looked up. "Can you just not make this a thing?" she muttered. I tried again. "Why didn't you tell me?" "We didn't think you'd want to go," Mom said, grabbing her bag. "You didn't think to ask?" Dad didn't meet my eyes. "It's complicated." Then they turned, just like that. No hug, no apology. I stood there and watched as they disappeared through security, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The worst part wasn't the shock. It was how unsurprising it felt. That feeling had been building for years, the slow, steady erosion of inclusion. The family photos where I was half-cropped, the dinner conversations that flowed around me like I wasn't even at the table, birthdays remembered late, favors forgotten, apologies that never came. And now, this. When the plane finally took off, I stood by the window gripping the cold metal railing. People passed around me, bustling, joyful, tired. I was 17 and completely alone, and no one, not one person, looked at me like something was wrong. Because I didn't look wrong. I looked normal. I looked like every other teenager in an airport. But inside, something was collapsing. I found a bench near baggage claim and sat there for what felt like hours. I didn't cry, not then. I just stared at the floor, my mind looping back over every moment, trying to find some hint, some signal I'd missed. I checked my phone. One new text. "Stay with Aunt May. We'll talk later." That was it. No explanation, no reassurance, just instructions, like I was some afterthought to be rerouted. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed and went dark. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. They hadn't forgotten me, they hadn't overlooked me. They had decided deliberately, coldly, that I wasn't coming. And worse, they'd waited until the last possible moment to let me find out on my own. Because confrontation was harder, because dealing with my reaction would have been too much trouble, they left me because they could. And now, for the first time, I realized something else. I didn't have to wait for them to come back. I stayed on that bench until the airport emptied of urgency. The rush faded, announcements quieted. My phone buzzed once with a low battery warning and then died completely. I didn't move, I couldn't, my legs were functional, my mind wasn't. Eventually, I stood and started walking, dragging my suitcase behind me like an anchor. Every sound echoed, the wheels clacking on tile, the hum of vending machines, distant laughter from some far-off gate. Everything felt like it was happening through a thick pane of glass. I wasn't waiting for them anymore. That ship or plane had sailed, but I didn't know where to go. Aunt May lived in Ohio. I was in Florida. My bank account had $76 and change. Enough for a bus ticket, maybe. Not enough for food or comfort or safety. I sat on a different bench, then stood again. Walked aimlessly. I kept expecting something to break the spell. A call from Mom, a text from Amber, even Dad's gruff voice in my voicemail. But nothing came. I was a name they were done saying. A family of 4 walked past me laughing. The mom had a stroller. The dad carried 2 backpacks. The teenage son had headphones on. The little girl clung to a stuffed giraffe. I stared until they disappeared into the corridor. I kept moving. The absurdity of it all came in waves. The fact that I had clothes packed for a California beach and no way to get anywhere but here. That my parents were somewhere over the Rockies right now, sipping soda and pretending everything was fine. That Amber probably hadn't even noticed my seat was empty. No, that wasn't true. Amber noticed everything. She just didn't care. I found a charging station near baggage claim and sat there for over an hour, letting my phone charge just enough to power on. When it did, there were no new messages. Just that same cold sentence waiting like a tombstone. Stay with Aunt May. We'll talk later. I typed out a reply twice and deleted both. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't come out like a scream. So I scrolled instead, opened my messages, searched for Aunt May's number. She wasn't a daily contact, more like a once-a-year holiday call, but she was kind. She remembered birthdays. She sent cards with glitter and stickers even when I was too old to care. I tapped call. It rang twice before she answered. Hello? Hi, I said, and my voice cracked. A pause, then sharp concern. Sweetheart, are you okay? They left, I said. They went without me. What? She snapped. Who? My parents, Amber, they're gone. They were supposed to take me to California, but I wasn't on the flight. Another pause, longer this time. They told me you weren't coming, that you were feeling sick. I closed my eyes. They didn't even tell me I wasn't going. Oh, honey. Her voice softened with heartbreak and fury. Where are you? Orlando International. I don't know what to do. I'll come get you, she said instantly. Give me a few hours. No, I said it quickly, firmly. I don't want you to drive that far. It's too much. I don't care. You're not staying there alone. I felt something warm in my chest, like a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Let me figure it out, please. She hesitated. If you're sure. I am. Okay. But you check in with me, constantly. I will. When I hung up, I almost wished I hadn't, because now I'd spoken it out loud. Now it was real. They had left me. They had lied about why, and even if Aunt May believed me, that didn't make it hurt less. I sat in silence for a while, scrolling through my photo gallery without seeing anything. School pictures. Amber and I when we were little. Her Christmas morning with unwrapped gifts and messy hair. Everything looked so normal, but now I was peeling back the skin of every memory, looking for the truth underneath. Had I always been invisible? It was like remembering a dream backward. There were signs. I just hadn't wanted to see them, like when they forgot to pick me up from swim practice. Or when they took Amber to the amusement park without telling me. We thought you had plans, they'd said. You're always so quiet. Quiet didn't mean absent. I was there. I just wasn't what they wanted to look at. And now, they'd made it official. The strangest part was how calm I felt now. The panic had burned out, leaving only a cold, steady clarity. I wasn't going to sit here and wait for them to decide I mattered. I wasn't going to call and beg for a return flight or explanations. They had made their move. Now I had to make mine. I wandered out of the terminal just before midnight, the humid Florida air wrapping around me like a damp blanket. The airport buzz had faded to a hum. I was running on fumes, physically, emotionally, financially. I had no plan, no idea what came next. I walked past a line of cabs and ride shares, ignoring the curious glances of drivers. My phone buzzed with a low battery warning again, and I turned it off to save what little charge remained. Every part of me wanted to sit down on the sidewalk and disappear, but I kept walking. Across the street from the terminal, past a row of palm trees and parking lots, I found a dimly lit budget motel. The sign flickered with a dying neon vacancy. It was the kind of place where people paid cash and didn't give names. I didn't care. I just needed a bed and a locked door. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of mildew and cigarettes. A sleepy-eyed man in a hoodie sat behind the front desk, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I walked in, his eyes scanning me with a quick flicker of curiosity, then caution. "Checking in?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice dry. "ID?" he said. I hesitated. My hands trembled as I pulled my wallet from my backpack. "Do you take debit?" He nodded. "95 for the night." "You over 18? I lied. "Yeah." He stared for a second too long, then shrugged. "All right." I paid, got my key, and dragged myself to a room on the first floor. The sheets were scratchy, the AC rattled, and the bathroom light buzzed like it might explode. But I was alone and I was safe. That was enough. I sat on the bed for a long time trying to slow my thoughts. I kept going back to the airport, to the moment the gate doors closed. I replayed it like a movie. Sometimes I imagined shouting, chasing them down, making a scene. Other times, I imagined doing exactly what I did, nothing. Eventually, I lay down fully dressed and drifted into a shallow, restless sleep. The next morning, I woke to the sound of knocking. I shot up, heart pounding. "Housekeeping," a voice called. I stayed silent until the footsteps faded. Then I got up and checked my phone. 1% battery, no new messages. I went to the front desk around noon to ask about nearby food. The same man was there, this time sipping a soda and watching something on a tiny tablet behind the counter. "Hey," I said, "do you know where I can get something cheap to eat?" "Walking distance?" He looked up. "There's a gas station a block east. They've got sandwiches and stuff." "Thanks," I said, turning. "Wait," he added. "You good?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "You came in looking wrecked last night. People usually either show up wasted or running from something. You weren't either." I hesitated. Then I said, "My family left me." He raised an eyebrow. "I was supposed to go on a trip with them. They booked flights for themselves, not for me." "Damn," he said, low and slow. "That's cold." I nodded. He tilted his head. "You got somewhere to go?" "Eventually. I just need time to figure it out." He stared at me again, then said, "I'm Malik." I shook his hand. "I'm Sam." "Look, Sam, I don't got much, but I've worked here for a while. People don't notice a lot, but I do. If you need a little help, like food, whatever, I can swing something." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thanks. I'll be okay." "You sure?" he asked. I nodded, even though I wasn't, but the offer mattered more than I could say. At the gas station, I bought a peanut butter sandwich, a bottle of water, and a cheap phone charger. I sat outside on the curb to eat, watching cars pass like nothing had changed in the world. Back in the room, I plugged in my phone and finally let it charge. Notifications buzzed in slowly. One email from school. A calendar alert for Amber's orthodontist appointment. Nothing from them, of course not. Later, I returned to the lobby, partly out of boredom, partly because I didn't want to feel so invisible anymore. Malik was still there, cleaning the counter. "You ever think maybe this wasn't an accident?" he asked. "What?" "Your family, leaving you. Maybe it wasn't just, 'Oh no, we forgot Sam.' Maybe they planned it." The idea made my stomach twist. "They lied to your aunt," he continued. "They didn't tell you, didn't answer your calls. Sounds deliberate." I stared at him. He shrugged. "I've seen worse. Sometimes being left behind is just what people do when they've already decided you don't count." His words didn't shock me. They settled into something I'd already half believed. Maybe, I said quietly. He looked at me. So, what are you going to do now? I didn't know yet. But something inside me had started to harden, like clay taking shape. I wasn't going to wait to be rescued anymore. Back in my motel room, I sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop open on my knees. The air conditioning rattled, trying and failing to cool the sticky Florida air. My inbox was open. I stared at it like it held a secret. I started scrolling. There were a few hotel confirmations. Car rental receipts. The flight itinerary my mom had forwarded weeks ago, but when I opened it, my name wasn't on the list. Just hers, Dad's, and Amber's. I double-checked the confirmation number, cross-referenced it with other emails. I wasn't included, not by mistake. They'd booked the tickets without me, on purpose. My name hadn't been forgotten. It had never been typed. The realization didn't come like a slap. It came like a slow, icy wave, like standing waist-deep in cold water and feeling it rise inch by inch. This was deliberate. They hadn't planned to take me. They'd planned to leave me behind. I sat there for a long time, the screen glowing in the dim room, before clicking over to my messages. Most were irrelevant. But then I noticed something odd, an old group chat between Mom, Dad, and Amber. I wasn't in it, obviously, but I had once borrowed Amber's laptop for homework and forgot to sign out of my own email. She hadn't noticed. That's how I had the thread. It was old, from a few months back, but it hit me like a truck. Mom, I don't want another scene this year. She always gets upset. Dad, it's just easier if she stays. She barely talks anyway. Amber, I mean, she'll survive. She's not a baby. That was it. No names. But it didn't have to be spelled out. I was she. I was the inconvenience, the one who'd cause a scene, the one who didn't matter enough to consider. I slammed the laptop shut and sat in the dark, letting the glow of the screen fade from my eyes. I wasn't crying, not exactly. My body felt beyond that, like I'd already exhausted every emotional resource I had. I needed answers, but I wasn't going to get them from them. Not the kind I needed. I needed clarity from myself. So I grabbed the small travel journal I'd kept buried at the bottom of my bag. I hadn't written in it in over a year. I flipped it open. The entries were messy, scattered, and painfully honest. They weren't stories. They were moments. Memories. March 4th. Mom forgot to pick me up. Again. She said she thought I had a ride. Amber got picked up early. May 22nd. Family game night. I asked to play. Amber said I'd ruin the vibe. They didn't disagree. August 9th. I got an A on my math final. No one said anything. Each page was another weight. I hadn't written them with anger, just confusion, hurt. Like I was trying to understand why I always felt on the outside, even in my own house. Somewhere in the middle I found an entry from my birthday, November 17th. They forgot. I didn't say anything. Amber gave me half her cookie at dinner. That was the only gift. I stared at that line for a long time. Half a cookie. That was the measure of how much I mattered in that house. Suddenly, I couldn't sit still. I grabbed my phone, opened a new message and started typing. Not to Amber, not to my parents, to myself. I was never the problem, I typed. They were just never willing to see me. Then I did something I hadn't dared to do all week. I called Aunt May again. "Hi, sweetheart," she answered quickly. "How are you holding up?" "I found some things," I said. "Emails, messages." She was quiet. "They never planned to take me," I said, "and they didn't even pretend." "Oh, honey, I don't want to stay angry," I told her. "But I think I've been pretending for a long time, pretending I was okay with being invisible." "You were never invisible," she said. "They just refused to look." That broke something in me. I wiped my face and nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Do you still want to come here?" she asked gently. "Not yet," I said, "but I think I will." "Soon, whenever you're ready." After we hung up, I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought about all the birthdays, holidays, the dinners where I'd sat through silence while they talked over me. I'd spent so long trying not to make waves, To be easy, manageable, invisible, but not anymore. I wasn't the one who left. They were the ones who turned away. And now they were going to learn that I could stand alone. The next morning I woke up before the sun, the air in the room thick with something I couldn't name. Resolve, maybe, or resignation. Either way, I knew what I needed to do. I sat at the desk by the window and opened my laptop. The screen glowed soft and accusing. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant at first, then steady. I started typing. Not a rant, not a cry for attention, just the truth, calm, complete, and unfiltered. I addressed it to all three, Mom, Dad, and Amber. A single message. I know you didn't plan to take me. I found the emails. You didn't forget. You decided. And instead of talking to me, you left me in an airport to figure it out alone. I paused. I've been wondering for years if I was imagining things. If maybe I was too sensitive, too quiet, too much trouble to include. But now I see clearly. You didn't want me there. And that hurts more than anything. I stared at the blinking cursor, then kept writing. I'm not writing this to beg for an explanation or an apology. I just want you to know that I know, and I'm not waiting anymore. Not for your messages, not for your permission, not for your approval. I ended it simply. I hope your trip is everything you wanted. I'm moving on. And I hit send. No dramatic sign-off. No love you out of habit. Just the truth, finally spoken. The reply came a few hours later. From Mom, of course. Dad rarely texted. Amber never initiated anything unless it was for show. Her response was clinical. We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought you needed space. You've seemed distant lately. We assumed you'd prefer to stay with Aunt May. Maybe we made the wrong call, but you don't have to turn this into something it's not. It was everything I expected. No ownership, no responsibility, just vague reasoning, the kind that makes you question your own perception. Gaslighting in soft language. I didn't reply. Later that afternoon, I got a text from Amber. Mum's upset. Why did you have to make this public? I laughed bitterly. Public? I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't even told Aunt May the worst of it. But that's how they thought. Image first. Always image first. I put my phone down and let it buzz in silence. That night, Malik caught me in the lobby again. He was wiping down the vending machines, headphones in, but he pulled one out when he saw me. You okay? He asked. Sent them the message, I said. Told them I knew. He whistled low. Damn, how'd they take it? Exactly how I thought they would. He nodded. That sucks. It's fine, I said. I wasn't expecting anything else. He leaned against the counter. You know, most people keep going back, hoping next time's different. I looked at him. I'm not most people. He smiled just a little. I can tell. For the next few days, I stayed at the motel. I offered to help Malik with odd jobs, emptying trash, restocking towels, wiping windows. He didn't pay me much, just cash from the tip jar, but it was enough to buy groceries and save a few bucks. I liked the routine, the simplicity, the independence. One night, after scrubbing down a vending area, Malik tossed me a soda and said, "So what's next?" I don't know, I said. I don't have much, but I'm not stuck anymore. You ever think about where they're flying back from? He asked. I hadn't, not in detail. They're in California. They'll have to come back through this airport. I nodded slowly. I guess they will. Maybe that's when you say the last thing you need to say. I didn't answer, but later that night, I pulled out the flight itinerary from Mom's email. Their return flight was scheduled exactly 12 days from now, landing back in Orlando at 6:40 p.m. I stared at the screen. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want a scene, but I wanted closure. Real closure. The kind you don't get from silence or fake apologies. The kind you carve out for yourself when no one else will. I clicked over to the airline's site and checked prices. My heart beat a little faster when I saw it. One seat left on that return flight. I didn't know if it was fate or just timing, but I didn't care. I clicked it. The price was steep, but between what Malik paid me and the last of my savings, I had enough. Barely. I booked it. My name, printed on the confirmation email, was the most beautiful thing I'd seen in days. They had bought tickets for themselves. Now I had mine. The confirmation email sat in my inbox like a quiet revolution. My name was there, spelled correctly. No omissions, no errors. Just Sam Harris, seat 28A, return flight from LAX to Orlando. The same flight my family would be on. This time I wasn't an afterthought. I was the one making the move. The motel room felt different after that, like the walls were finally mine. Like I wasn't just hiding, I was preparing. Every dollar I had left mattered now. I couldn't afford to waste anything. I kept working with Malik during the day, helping clean and restock. He even let me shadow the front desk one evening, showing me how to check people in, how to spot fake IDs, how to deal with entitled guests without losing your cool. "You've got the calm face," he said. "People don't see you coming." "Story of my life," I muttered. He laughed. "That's power. Trust me." That stuck with me. Each day I checked my flight info again. The details never changed. Neither did my resolve. I kept my boarding pass printed and folded inside my journal, tucked between the pages where I'd written down all the things I was too scared to say out loud before. Some nights I reread my old entries, not to torture myself but to remember. Every memory felt sharper now. Not because they hurt more, but because they didn't own me anymore. I wasn't defined by being left behind. I was defined by what I did next. One afternoon, Malik handed me an envelope. "This is from my cousin," he said. "She runs a thrift store and needs help reorganizing the stockroom. Part-time cash, it's a few blocks from here." I blinked. "Are you serious?" "She's chill. Pays under the table, no questions." I wanted to hug him, but settled for "thank you, seriously. Just promise me you won't forget us little people when you're out there crushing life." I smiled. Deal. The thrift store was cluttered and smelled like old wood and laundry soap. But the woman, Danny, was kind, efficient, and didn't ask a single personal question. She just handed me gloves and pointed to the boxes. I spent 3 days helping her reorganize shelves, tag donations, and clean out forgotten corners. The cash she gave me on the 3rd day felt heavier than the amount. It was independence in paper form. I used part of it to buy myself something small but symbolic, a new hoodie, nothing flashy, just clean, fitted, and mine, not a hand-me-down. Not a leftover. Mine. On day 10, I walked to a nearby barber shop. I hadn't touched my hair in months. The barber gave me a simple cut, nothing dramatic, just neat. Clean lines, a mirror version of myself I hadn't seen before. Afterward, I stopped at the motel lobby. Malik looked up and whistled. "Look at you. New look, new ID," I said with a grin. "You look like you're about to win something." "I think I already did." He nodded. "You're close, huh?" 2 days. He leaned on the counter. "You nervous?" "No," I said. And it was true. I'm ready. The night before my flight, I packed my things with purpose, not because I needed to leave, because I chose to. Every item went into my suitcase with precision. I left nothing scattered, no trace behind. I wasn't running. I was finishing something. The next morning, I checked my reflection one last time before leaving the room. My face looked the same, but everything behind it had changed. I walked to the terminal early, just as the sun was rising. The airport was busy, but not frantic. People rushed. Families clung to each other. Kids cried or laughed. Noise I once tried to shrink inside. But not now. Now I moved through it all with ease. When I passed security and sat at my gate, I didn't feel small. I felt still, like I was standing inside my own power finally. I pulled out my journal and wrote a single sentence. They left me to be free of me. But I stayed to become free from them. I closed the cover. In a few hours I'd be on that plane, on the same flight, in the same cabin, breathing the same air, but they wouldn't know who I was anymore. Because I wasn't the invisible one now. I was the one with the boarding pass. I arrived at the airport 3 hours early. Not because I was anxious, but because I wanted to choose my place in the moment. I wasn't rushing, I wasn't following. I was ahead of them for once, on purpose. The terminal buzzed with a low, familiar energy. Announcements echoed overhead. People wove through lines and luggage. I knew the routine now. I'd done this before, just not like this. This time I had my ticket. I belonged here. I found a seat near their gate. My heart was steady, surprisingly calm. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need distractions. I wanted to feel every second. I wanted to be fully present when they appeared. And then, about an hour later, they did. First I saw Amber dragging a sleek suitcase, her phone in one hand, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Then Mom, checking their boarding passes. Then Dad, grumbling at something, phone to his ear. They looked exactly the same. Vacation hadn't changed them. They didn't see me at first. I watched as they walked past the rows of seats, found their spot, settled down. My hands didn't shake. My breathing didn't change. I stood up and walked toward them, casual, deliberate, each step louder in my chest than on the floor. Amber looked up first. Her eyes met mine and widened. Her mouth parted slightly, like she wasn't sure if she was seeing a ghost or a memory. Then Mom turned. Her whole body stiffened. Dad followed her gaze, phone lowering slowly. None of them said anything for a long moment. Then Mom blinked. "Sam?" I nodded once. "You're here," she said, like it was a surprise. "I figured it out," I replied simply. Her expression faltered. Dad cleared his throat but said nothing. Amber opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes dropped to my clothes, my haircut, the way I stood, like she was realizing I didn't look the same anymore. "I bought my own ticket," I said. "I knew which flight you were taking." Mom finally spoke again. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," I said. "But I wanted to." She shifted uncomfortably. "Sam, this trip, it wasn't meant to hurt you." "I know," I said again. "It wasn't meant to include me either." Dad finally spoke. "We thought it'd be easier." "For who?" I asked, not angry, just curious. Silence. Amber looked away. I nodded. "That's what I thought." There was a long pause, the kind that stretches wider the longer it lasts. Then Mom gestured toward the open seat next to her. "You can sit with us," she offered. "No thanks," I said. "I already have a seat." She blinked, but didn't argue. "I'll see you on the plane," I said, and turned away. I found another spot near the window, away from them, close enough to be visible, far enough to be free. I didn't feel triumphant, I didn't feel cruel, just solid, grounded. I hadn't come to shame them or make a point. I came because I wanted to reclaim something they took. They didn't speak to me again before boarding. They avoided eye contact. Amber kept glancing sideways, then looking down. Mom looked everywhere but at me. Dad pretended to be invested in his phone. When they finally lined up for boarding, I waited. I didn't rush to be near them. I moved when my group was called, showed my ticket, walked the jet bridge like I'd done it 1,000 times. I took my seat, 28A, by the window, a few rows behind theirs. I could see the back of Amber's head, the slight tilt of Mom's posture, the square line of Dad's shoulders. They hadn't looked back and I didn't need them to. I stared out the window, watching the crew move below, watching the world adjust itself for takeoff. I thought about how far I'd come, not in miles, in identity. They still thought of me as the quiet one, the background character. They didn't know the version of me that booked his own way back, that made money, made choices, rebuilt himself from silence, and maybe they never would. But I knew. And that was enough. The plane lifted from the tarmac with a low rumble, pressing us gently into our seats. I stared out the window, watching the city shrink beneath the clouds, the sun pouring gold through the glass. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. They were a few rows ahead, but it felt like we were on different planes entirely. Different lives, different realities. I was no longer tethered to their orbit. I was just a passenger now. On the same flight, yes, but not part of the same story. The cabin settled into a soft hum. Passengers adjusted their seats, flipped through magazines, tapped at screens. I kept my gaze on the sky. My thoughts, though, drifted to everything unsaid. It wasn't revenge I felt. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was clarity. The kind that doesn't come with shouting matches or grand scenes. Just presence, just truth. A flight attendant passed by with a tray of drinks. I accepted a ginger ale, cracked the can, and took a sip. The cold hit felt sharp and clean, and then I heard a voice. "Hey, Amber." I turned. She stood just beside my row, her hands fidgeting at her sides. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. "Can I sit?" I nodded once. She slid into the aisle seat, left the middle one between us empty. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, "I didn't know they hadn't bought you a ticket." I raised an eyebrow. "I mean, I didn't know for sure," she added quickly. "I figured they'd told you." "You figured wrong." She nodded. "I didn't ask questions. I should have." I didn't reply. I let the quiet stretch, let her feel it. She glanced sideways at me. "You look different." "I am." Another pause. Then, softer. "Why did you come back?" I thought for a second. "Because I wanted to stop feeling like a ghost." She swallowed hard. "You're not a ghost." "Felt like it." She didn't deny it. "Mom said you made a scene, that you tried to make her feel guilty." I didn't try. "I just told the truth." She was quiet again. "I read the messages," I said, "the ones between the three of you." Her face froze. "I was never supposed to be part of that trip. You all made peace with it long before the flight. I just didn't know I'd already been cut out. I didn't know what to say," she murmured. "Then maybe don't say anything." She looked like she wanted to cry. But I didn't feel like comforting her. I didn't owe her that, not here, not now. Finally, she stood. "I'm sorry," she said, almost too soft to hear. I didn't answer. She walked back to her seat. I closed my eyes and leaned back. It was strange, how final it felt. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way, but like a soft door closing behind me. Quiet, definite. We were still in the same metal tube, 30,000 feet in the air, but something had shifted. They didn't hold me anymore. Their silence didn't hurt. Their words didn't shake me. Later, as the flight began its descent, I watched the clouds part to reveal the familiar lines of the city, roads and rooftops, my childhood hometown. It didn't feel like home anymore. As we landed, the tires kissed the runway with a shudder. Passengers clapped, some chuckled. I stayed still. After the seatbelt sign went off, people stood, stretching and grabbing bags. I waited. No rush. I could see them a few rows ahead, gathering their things. They didn't look back. I didn't expect them to. Eventually, I stepped into the aisle, my backpack slung over one shoulder. I moved toward the front, past rows of strangers, past my family. Mom turned just slightly as I passed. Our eyes met for the briefest moment. "Sam," she said, not quite reaching out. "I'll be okay," I told her. Then I walked off the plane. The airport felt colder than I remembered. Maybe it was just me. The shift wasn't in the air, it was in my skin. I moved through the terminal without looking for them. I knew they were behind me somewhere, walking the same path, but on a different track. Outside, the afternoon sun filtered through clouds. I paused just long enough to take a breath. I didn't wait. No backward glances, no lingering hesitation. I took a cab, paid for it myself. The driver didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer any. I watched the city pass by through the window, each block layered with pieces of a life I no longer belonged to. Familiar streets, familiar signs, but the feeling inside me was new. When we reached the house, I didn't feel dread. I felt prepared. I stepped inside without knocking. I still had my key. The house was quiet, and I was grateful for that. I walked to my room, dropped my bag, and looked around. Nothing had changed. Same posters on the wall, same stack of books by the bed. The life I'd paused before the trip sat there waiting, untouched. But I wasn't the same person who'd left it. I opened the closet and began packing. I didn't bother being subtle. I took what mattered: clothes, notebooks, the laptop, my journal, a few keepsakes. The rest could stay. Halfway through, I found a framed photo on the shelf, a family picture, taken 2 summers ago at the beach. Mum, Dad, Amber, and me. I stared at it for a long time. My smile in the picture looked forced now, like I'd been holding something in, pretending I was part of it. I set the frame down face down. That night, I got a call from Aunt May. You made it back? She asked. Yeah, I said. I'm home. She hesitated. And how was it? I thought for a moment. It was the end. There was a beat of silence. I meant it, you know, she said. My offer still stands. I know, I replied. I was hoping it did. She smiled through the phone. There's a spare room. It's yours if you want it. I do. You sure? Yeah. I'm done trying to fit somewhere I was never meant to. Then pack your things and come on. No pressure, no drama, just a fresh start. Sounds perfect. The next morning, I sent a message to Danny, the thrift store owner Malik had introduced me to. She'd mentioned remote inventory work, something I could do from anywhere. Still interested in help? I wrote. She replied in minutes. Absolutely. When can you start? I smiled. Tomorrow. Everything began to line up, like puzzle pieces I didn't even know I'd been gathering. Later that afternoon, I finished packing. 2 bags. That was all I needed. I didn't say goodbye to anyone in the house. I didn't leave a note. They'd know I was gone when the silence grew unfamiliar. Before I left, I sat down one last time in my room and opened my phone. No new messages from any of them, not even Amber. So I typed one final message to Mom. Thanks for forgetting me. You gave me a reason to remember who I am. I hit send, closed the phone, and walked out the door. The bus station wasn't far. The ride would be long, but I didn't mind. I had my journal, my headphones, a job waiting, and a room with my name on it. And peace. That, most of all. As I boarded the bus, I felt the tension slide off me like an old coat. I wasn't dragging their silence anymore. I wasn't trying to earn space that should have always been mine. I chose myself, and that choice would echo louder than any words they never said. The bus rumbled to life, pulling away from the station with a low groan. I sat by the window, forehead resting lightly against the glass, watching the city melt into distance. I didn't cry, I didn't smile, I just breathed. Each mile felt like a page turning. This wasn't an escape. It wasn't a rebellion. It was a reclamation of space, of voice, of self. The seat I chose wasn't just a place to sit. It was a decision. To no longer beg for inclusion. To no longer ask to be seen. I'd learned that silence was sometimes louder than screaming, and leaving could be the most honest sentence you ever write. The road stretched long ahead. I had hours before I reached Aunt May's house. She'd texted me the address, told me she was making my favorite. Grilled cheese with too much butter and tomato soup from a can. She wasn't trying to impress me. She was just trying to feed me. That alone felt like home. I opened my journal, flipping past the older entries. The pages were heavy with old echoes, but the last few held something different. Strength, clarity. My own handwriting looked firmer, like I finally trusted what I had to say. I wrote one more line. This is the beginning, not the aftermath. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. A message from Malik. You on your way? Yeah, I replied. Thank you for everything. Don't forget who you are now. I stared at the screen for a second, then typed, I won't. I chose this version. The bus hit the highway. The windows vibrated with wind and momentum. I watched the fields pass by, thinking of everything that had led me here, of Amber's brief apology, too soft and too late, of Dad's silence, more painful than anger, of Mom's cold logic trying to wrap abandonment in excuses, and of myself, standing in the airport with my own boarding pass, sitting on that plane alone by choice, saying goodbye without words. I didn't regret confronting them, but I didn't need anything else from them either. I wasn't waiting for understanding. I wasn't chasing closure like a child reaching for a door already closed. I'd already walked through. Eventually the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. People on the bus shifted, adjusted blankets, put on headphones. I stayed with the hum of the engine and the rhythm of forward motion. Somewhere down the road, I'd rebuild. Not from nothing, but from the version of me they tried to leave behind. The version that survived. That adapted. That made something out of being forgotten. That was the gift they didn't mean to give me. By the time we reached Aunt May's town, the stars were out. The bus slowed into the station, brakes hissing. I gathered my things and stepped off without hesitation. There she was, waiting near the benches, coat buttoned wrong, smile wide as ever. "You made it," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I did." She stepped back, looked me over. "You look taller." "I feel taller." She laughed, looping her arm through mine. "Come on, let's get you fed. And then you can tell me everything or nothing, either is fine." That was the difference. She didn't demand my story. She made space for it. Later that night, in a small guest room with soft blankets and the smell of lavender in the sheets, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out the window. The world was quiet. So was I. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet I used to know. This one was mine. To anyone who's ever been left behind, on purpose or by accident, I hope you know this. You get to decide what happens next. You get to buy your own ticket, write your own chapter, choose your own seat, and it's never too late to start over. If this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know. And if you want to know what happened when I saw Amber again, 1 year later, click the video on your screen now. I promise it's worth it.